John from Ripewave Audio with our August 14th, 2024 edition of Ripewave Connections. This is a series where we get a little closer to your comments with some feedback directly to you, a little bit more than what we can do in a comment back through text. And with that, some hi-fi and home theater news to keep you current on what is going on. In this video, we're going back to our video on Onkyo, what we're waiting for from them, some comments on that. We're going to talk about the A1 Evo calibration optimization tool, comments that we got on the A1H from Denon versus Marantz's Cinema 30, and of course some other comments such as Onkyo issues and Roku ultra settings, and what we used to do with our under $5,000 series. So we'll get into these items. So the video that we did on we're waiting for a flagship with more channels from Onkyo, because we're seeing the likes of Marantz and Denon coming out with processors or receivers that have more channels, more amplifiers in, particularly on the subwoofer side. 4 channels of independent subwoofer control, and where Onkyo is only giving 2. So what were some of the comments that were coming back on this? Now, one of these I didn't quite interpret right. They were talking about 1095 watts. What could they possibly be conveying here? And ultimately, I thought about this for a bit. Oh, I think he's talking about the power supply that is in Onkyo TX-RZ50. This thing is massive. It can handle 1,095 watts versus the Marantz Cinema 30, which on their specification sheet is 780 watts. So this is certainly a powerhouse. Now we got another comment back along the lines of power, and what they were saying is, I don't really want more channels from a flagship, but give me more power. Yeah, you're claiming that this is 140 watts driven into 2 channels, but give it to me all channels driven. They also made this comment about where these things are made, Malaysia versus Japan, and build quality on all that. Now, I do agree that when you get a product made for Japan, there's certainly can be a higher quality associated with it. But that's not the end story. There can be problems with things made in Japan, but there could be good products made in Malaysia or other countries that also are high quality. But we do see a higher consistency of high quality products coming out from Japan. And then there was a bunch of comments that followed on this and feeling one way or the other. But they got back into the power story, which this started with, and the mention of Audioholics measuring 170 watts per channel, 2 channels driven, and 133 watts, all channels driven, which exceeded what Onkyo is specifying. So this is a powerful amp that is coming there. But the point taken is this individual wants to see more power, not necessarily more channels. Then there was a question, and while this was reported against the Onkyo video, they did bring up a point that we make for processors, receivers on channel count. And they were particularly calling attention to the Yamaha RX-A8A. They couldn't understand why we reported this as 13. They felt it should have been reported as 11 because they would call this 11.2 receiver. Well, 11 plus 2 is 13. I'm reporting, when we say 13, the total channels processed. And that includes subwoofer channels. Subwoofer channels need to be processed. So that's where we come up with 13, particularly if they're independently controllable. So there's processing that goes on. And to normalize this, to be very consistent across brands that have dedicated subwoofer outputs that are fixed. It can't be assigned to anything but a subwoofer. You have other products like our Emotiva RMC1 and RCam that have assignable outputs, and those outputs could be a subwoofer, but they could be a height channel, a front wide, what have you. So they're flexible. So by calling it out by the number of channels it can process, we're given the total capability of the unit. but we're also specifying the speaker layouts that it can handle. So in this case, a Yamaha, 13 channels of processing, and they can handle up to a 7.2.4. So you see the maximum counts it can do for ear level, 7, for subwoofers, 2, and for height channels, 4. And that's how we report them. And I know it can get confusing, and I don't fault anybody for being confused, because if you go onto the websites of brands, we see a lot of different ways channel counts are reported, and they're reported even inconsistently amongst the same brand. So no fault, but we're trying to be as consistent as possible on how Ripewave Audio reports these. We had an individual report in about how they feel that they want to stick with Onkyo for the THX certification. That's the important part for them. Now, the mention of having Ultra 2 Plus receivers. Now, I'm not sure THX is using that terminology anymore. Way Onkyo reports their certification is just saying THX certified. They're not using any of these labels. Now, if we go on to the THX site, we see a document that explains the different speaker types, although I couldn't see if those classifications would also apply to a receiver or a processor. But they are talking about it for speakers, and they talk about a compact certification, select, ultra, and dominus. And this is related to the room size that you're targeting to meet. So if you have a larger room, you're ultra or you're dominus. If you have a smaller room, you're select or compact. And that's how they use these classes. The receiver that Onkyo has, it just says certified. It's not holding it to one of these room sizes. I don't know a lot about all these levels, but I'm not sure if they're still using that Ultra 2 Plus label anymore. But it does give you confidence. So that's what I noted here is, while you can get a receiver that has similar capabilities, when you get a certified product from Onkyo and Integra, that gives you confidence it's meeting those THX benchmarks and the configuration is aligned with the requirements. We had another person write in about, great idea, adding more channels to the Onkyo with wides, center back. And they're saying, make it like Trinoff. Keep up with them. Trinoff's very expensive. You could spend $20,000 or more on a Trinoff processor. So I'm hoping, make it more Trinoff-like, keep the price down. So that's the Onkyo, part of the Onkyo brand is that they're giving you high value. So let's get the features from Trinoff, but not ruin their competitive price structure. Now there are persons writing and say, very few people use more than 9 channels. 13 is massive. Well, you know what? You're right. I mean, it is getting to be an awful lot. And I remember when I had a 5.1 system, I thought, well, geez, do I really want, is back surrounds going to help? Or they had other things that came before immersive audio where they were adding even additional channels. Ultimately, we settled on these Atmos and DTSX and Oral 3D layouts we have today. But yeah, it is a lot. But the thing is, you can scale it to what you feel comfortable. What I don't like is when you select a processor receiver, to get a better sounding one, you also get more channels. I want to be able to buy a better sounding one, a really high quality processor receiver. That's 7.1 or 7.1.4. But it seems like when I go up in quality, I also gain maybe channels I don't need to use. So that's something to think about. Now the person's saying 2 channels is more than enough. There's not a wrong answer. Some people just prefer 2-channel listening. Some want that more immersive experience. You pick what's right for you. Right? Another person saying, hey, 5.1.2 is pretty awesome. I've seen experts come in and say, once you get beyond 7.2.4, you're reaching the point of diminishing returns. Maybe you put in those extra speakers to fill in if you have a larger room. But once you get beyond it, and some people say, and there's a debate, adding front wides versus another row of heights. That's a story for another day. Somebody just bought a Pioneer VSX LX805 for $2,000. It was met their budget and their criteria, which is great. But he agreed that, hey, look, you can add more channels. I would like it. You may pay a little bit more for it, maybe $800 or so. In this feedback, having more power wasn't a strong criteria. I said, yeah, look, the 4 channels you're adding could be going to the subwoofers, but it could be going to something else, right? So I could have thought maybe on that response a little bit more, but generally speaking, it's a good feedback. This person wants a receiver that can handle 6 heights or 3 rows of heights. And you don't see a lot out there that do. You got to spend a lot to get into that category, and Onkyo isn't there yet. 7 ground level speakers or ear level speakers, 1 or 2 independent subs were fine for him. They're holding off right now to see, should I go with the Sony 7000 ES, or is Onkyo, Integra, or Pioneer coming out with something new? What I'm thinking is, the way you said that is the current offering from Onkyo, Integra, Pioneer wouldn't beat, from your perspective, the Sony 7000 ES with what's out there today. But if they were to come out with something new, you would reevaluate. Maybe I'm reading something into it, but hey, I'm always, hopefully we'll get some sort of surprise. I haven't heard of these larger models coming out from Onkyo, Integra, Pioneer, but let's see what the future brings. I would love to see something new. Thanking me here for the work, and I'm glad you appreciate what we do. What they're asking for here is to revisit a series we did in 2021. We're going through and looking at AV processors. In this case, it could have been receivers, but particularly ones that were under $5,000. In this case, delivering 12 channels or more. We carved it out in different ways. But we could bring this type of series back. Let's look at the receivers and the processors that are within a certain price range and do kind of a comparison of what you get in the same price range, and is one a higher value than the other. Good idea. Thanks for bringing that up. And then they're saying hopefully some newer processors come along, like maybe the AV20 from Marantz, or a new Tone Winner, or IOTA VX, Emotiva, Monoprice. We have rumors on some of these, but others we haven't heard, like Sony and Yamaha, what their next move is. Our connections video from yesterday got some comments. Somebody said, hey, look, I got this receiver. I think it was the TX-RZ50 that he was referring to. And he didn't like the fact that there wasn't a clear display on the front of the panel unless you have to push the info button. Wanted to be able to see that more permanently on the screen, or the default message on the screen is the surround mode. And I think that's kind of nice. I like seeing what the current surround mode is. Having to push a button is one thing. But I think his bigger gripe is probably the errors he's getting with Dirac. He's getting a 1003 error. Now, I had some problems with Dirac. I think they still have some bugs to work out with Dirac Live implementation. Now, I could get it to work. I think they'll stay at it. They'll try to fix these. Even the Dirac Live website had in the release notes for latest versions, Dirac said the Onkyo products could be a little slower with the upload, download of the filters. So, yeah, I can see that point. But this certainly disappointing when you get a new unit and you expect everything just to work right. I agree. This person's looking for us to do a review on the Denon flagship, the AVR A1H, and how it compares to the Cinema 30. And before the Cinema 30 was released, the person tested the 50, the 40, and settled on the A1H from Denon. They generally prefer Marantz. Quite impressed with the A1H, but wanted to know our thoughts on the Cinema 30. And does it offer a more refined sound compared to the Denon A1H flagship? And they're already feeling that what they've got is spectacular. And it probably is. Some comments on here. I eventually weighed in. I haven't tested anything over $5,000, but I'm very curious about what's going on between $5,000 and $7,000. It was out of scope my first round, but I'm curious if you can still notice the sound quality difference between something like a Cinema 30, which is under $5,000, and the A1H, which is over. And setting aside the fact that the A1H has more channels, because there's no other product out there that has that many channels and amplifiers. They also mentioned that they can use those spare channels that they're not using on the Denon for zones. Well, my feeling is that's a lot of money to spend just to get the zones. I think I would want to have that sound quality argument that I like it for the sound quality, and then use those extra outputs for zones. But if I thought I could get a good enough sound quality for less money, like a Cinema 30, I might buy then a second AVR to do the zones, and I'd have more control and flexibility over it. So that's the way I would do it, and maybe actually end up spending less. And the other question was on whether Dirac could compensate for the lack of hardware features that are in the Marantz, particularly the HDAM technology. And I don't believe it will be able to match entirely. So one of the things that Dirac does, it will get your levels set, it will do your phasing and your timing. I think that will match pretty much between products. Okay, so you have a Denon and a Marantz, and they both have Dirac. You run them through, they should get those right, provided you got the same speakers, the same wires, and everything. That should be very close. Where you start to see maybe some differences on the tonal stuff, although you can, put a target curve in and try to match that as closely as possible. I think on some of the highs and the lows, you maybe have a little more challenge to get those to match. But I think the most difficult thing to try to emulate, provided that the HDAM really does deliver more, is dynamics, how quickly something is acting. I liken this to maybe a cruise control system on a car. And you've got one car which has a very basic 4-cylinder engine, 0 to 60 in 10 seconds. And the other one's really, it's a Tesla, and it can do 0 to 60 in 3-4 seconds. I don't know. And so that Tesla's going to get there. It's going to be right on track. And it'll always, despite there being hills in the road, whatever the road throws at it, it's going to maintain 55 miles an hour perfectly. And then maybe the other one is a little slow, a little lagging, right? It takes it a little while to catch up or something like that. So those are some of the things that better internal components have that can't really be corrected for with a room calibration like Dirac. That's just my thoughts on it. I haven't run that test. One feedback on the Roku and getting that to work with height channels. And they said, try doing the pass-through. And I found the screenshot here that, yes, indeed, you can set the digital output format to a pass-through mode. So we'll go through at some point and maybe do a formal video on streaming for Atmos. And then this brings us to this new room calibration add-on, which is called A1 Evo, Audyssey 1 Evo. I guess that's what they came up with the name. But I really appreciate this feedback because it's very detailed, telling me how it works. I wasn't too familiar with this. This is really nicely outlined. A nice comment in here. They give you the video with the link, the forum thread, how to download the Evo scripts, get the latest REW that it works with, and the Facebook group that is focused on this. Really nice. Thanks for doing this. I also got a similar comment a couple of weeks ago from another person and pointing me in this direction too. So definitely something I need to look into, learn more about. And if this can save you some money over buying the Mult EQ-X or paying for the Dirac Live license, that might be good. We can do that comparison. Of course, I got to get my Marantz Cinema 50 back before I can do that. But this is the way I understand it works. You measure it with your Mult EQ mobile app, and that is like a $20 option that you can download from the stores, the Play Store or the Apple Store. That gets sent to REW. Then you run the A1 Evo script from REW. And once that's all done, you import that back into Audyssey, and then that sends the signal ultimately to your Denon Marantz receiver that supports Audyssey. So it'll only work with those two brands that support Audyssey. If this saves people money, and it does a great job, we want to know about it. So that wraps it up for this August 14th edition of Ripewave Connections. Do you enjoy this video? Please like and subscribe if you did. You can hit that thanks button if you want to give us a one-time donation. Always appreciated. And that bell notification, no charge, informs you when the next video is posted. And until the next time we can meet, keep evolving your audio experience.